As the BRICS Summit draws to a close, Russian President Vladimir Putin is currently addressing members of the media. And of course, this is against the backdrop of quite a number of issues that these countries have been talking about, a number of decisions being reached, but also the plea there by President Cyril Ramaphosa that the international community cannot continue to turn a blind eye on the situation in Palestine. And of course, a number of issues around trade also popping up there when it comes to this particular summit. So for more on this, let's speak to Sophie Mokoena, SABC News International Editor. Sophie, of course, we are seeing President Vladimir Putin there addressing members of the media. He is, of course, the chair. Russia has been the chair, but at the same time, there's been a lot of focus to see how then this summit will also further cement the view that, of those who are saying that he's simply not isolated. If you think he is, you need to look at who exactly is being isolated currently when you look at this summit.
Yes, it's true. When you look at the countries that are there, particularly those countries that came yesterday late in the evening and this morning to be part of the extended BRICS Summit, you can see that the notion that he is isolated, it's not necessarily true, because you had quite a number of countries from the south, and you saw when they spoke there, many of them have a strong relationship with the Russian Federation, President Vladimir Putin. And I think with the media, if you look at this media briefing, look at the number of journalists who are there, look at that hall, it's packed. And therefore, all these journalists are going back to report about the outcomes of BRICS, and he is also answering other global questions. I mean, just now he was talking about Donald Trump, the question that came from the floor about Donald Trump. He spoke about Trump giving him assurance that he will stop the war in Ukraine. And you know that he doesn't have that hostile relationship with Donald Trump. And it comes at a time, you'll see at 7 when we bring you that report from New York by Shaw and Bryce Peace, that it looks like Donald Trump is doing well, and therefore we're counting days to the elections in the United States of America, and this is the report. On the other hand, you see a very confident, happy Vladimir Putin.
And of course, Sophie, at this hour, we may not have at this moment the clip by President Cyril Ramaphosa, but he did use this opportunity as well to say, and I quote, "The world cannot continue to allow conflicts to continue perpetually."
Yes, indeed, that's what the president presented this morning when he was addressing this extended meeting. And he was quite firm, unwavering, again using the word or the phrase genocide, saying that Israel is committing genocide. Before he left Russia, when he was doing a rap in the clip, he's talking about in a week's time, South Africa will be presenting the documents to the International Court of Justice, where these papers now, this is where South Africa is going to try and demonstrate, give evidence and information and facts in terms of the allegation that Israel is committing genocide. He also spoke about Sudan, lamenting the fact that 2 years on, people are still dying in Sudan and nobody cares. And it's true. People are just looking at Middle East and Ukraine. Earlier on, the head of the IMF, in her comments, she spoke only about Middle East and also about Ukraine. You can see that Africa is a forgotten issue in terms of that conflict in Sudan, and therefore it's up to Africans to really find a way to resolve that conflict in Sudan.
And of course, when you think about the developments there, it wasn't only about the conflicts. There were issues, as one of them, you and I touched on it, the issue of the currency coming up as well, seen by some as an issue that is still quite controversial, but also the decision to say that let's enhance trade and financial transactions using local currencies. But there is, of course, this conversation that continues around the BRICS currency.
Yes, of course, we saw some samples, people proposing how this BRICS currency should look like. And, but this is going to be a protracted engagement in relation to agreeing on a currency like you have the euro for all the European member countries. But what they have agreed on is that member countries of BRICS can do business using their own currencies. And now this has been extended to other 13 countries because they have extended BRICS to another level. It's called almost part of the BRICS countries. It's part of the BRICS countries. These are 13 countries. They are not necessarily at the top there. And when you look at those countries, it's Algeria, Nigeria, Uganda, and now with Ethiopia, Egypt, and South Africa. It's a powerful force from Africa. And also when you look at the GDP, South Africa is number 1, Egypt is number 2, Algeria is number 3, Nigeria is number 4, Ethiopia is number 6. And therefore, these powerful economies on the continent have decided to be part of this new movement or this group from different levels. We will have South Africa, Egypt and Ethiopia on the table, on the main table, and this additional layer. Then you have other countries such as Algeria and, of course, Nigeria and Uganda. And therefore, you can see that on the continent, there's interest, you know, to be part of this group. And therefore, I think we are seeing a changing world. I think this issue was even accepted by the IMF head today during the media briefing that something is happening, but they will wait and see what BRICS is saying in terms of details on how to use national currencies and the discussion around the issue of one currency, which will take time and years.
Mm. And of course, as you know, we've even said earlier on that even the issue of who becomes part of the bloc is also going to be another one that they may need to speak about and may be protracted in some cases. But as President Cyril Ramaphosa heads back, you know, to South Africa, there's another storm that is currently, you know, brewing. Let's look at this tweet, for example, that was put out there by the president's spokesperson, Vincent Mokoena. And this, of course, on the issue of this foreign policy. He says that the DA retains the right to maintain its own foreign policy position. However, the position cannot be imposed on the president under the guise of the GNU. The president will not be micromanaged by the DA in his execution of South Africa's foreign policy. And this is an issue that, Sophie, is now going to be a hot one again as the president then heads back.
When I spoke to Helen Zille at the Results Center, one thing that she told me was that the option was a different model. They wouldn't want to be part of the government. Because at that time, they realized that if they become part of government, there are lots of things that might cause tension and also unsettle their support base. One thing that has done just that, it's that trip to China. I can tell you behind the scenes, they may not accept, but it didn't sit well with many funders and supporters of the DA. Now, with BRICS, it gets even more complicated based on Lady R. And therefore, it is bound to cause this tension. But the reality is, much as the DA and other parties are part of this arrangement, the constitution of this country gives the president the powers. Now, if you want to remove the powers of the president to do certain things, you have to amend the constitution. And it's not going to be easy. You need even 2/3 majority. And that is why I know, I've spoken to people even last week, that some of the senior veterans and members of the ANC were saying to President Ramaphosa, go minority government so that ANC policies are not affected. But what you have to do, get the right people to different positions, and they must deliver and do what the voters want. But, of course, the majority prevailed. The prevailing voice was the government of national unity. Those people saw it coming, but here we are.
And of course, Sophie, they will continue to monitor this one because, as you say, it's going to be a hot potato. And you listen to some of those who are commenting on this one. They're talking about take action now and avoid, being left with egg on your face later. But how do you do that within the confines of the Government of National Unity? What happens then with this national dialogue that we're also seeing, the DA's Helen Zille coming out, also speaking about as well. So these dynamics are becoming somewhat interesting within the Government of National Unity. But Sophie, thank you so much for that. And let's see then what happens with this issue of foreign policy when the president touches down in the country. That's Sophie Mokoena, the SABC News International Editor, and we'll continue, of course, to bring you installments of this particular story.